All right, we're officially live. Thank you all for joining us for the webinar on evidence matters and trying to choose your next EdTech tool. My name is Nathan Martin. I'm the head of marketing here at Off to Class, and I am utterly thrilled to be joined by Dan Stanhope and LearnPlatform. I apologize, I did this last time, and we've had the thing going in another window, so y'all give me 2 seconds. Hang on.
Yep.
Sorry. Anyway, let's just keep going. I'm going to have to just talk through this. Yeah, joined by Dan Stanhope of LearnPlatform as a senior researcher. And we've also got Tarro Funches of Funches or Funches? How you say it, Tarro?
Funches.
Funches. Wonderful. And she's the EL coordinator, the English language coordinator at Canton Public School District. I'm going to let the two of you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your role for a second, then we'll jump into this conversation. Dan or Danny, would you mind telling us a little bit about Learn and about your own work?
Absolutely. Dan, Danny, Daniel, I'll answer to any of them. There's a few more in there too that we can toss out, but we'll talk about that later. Danny Stanhope, trained academically as an industrial and organizational psychologist. I've spent my career focused on research methodology and applied science with an emphasis from a content perspective on measuring and improving learning and performance for humans of all ages. I'm a known proponent of practical rigor, and you will often hear me pontificating about the importance of bridging the gap between science and practice. And yes, I'm not afraid to admit that. Lastly, I'm the founding researcher at LearnPlatform, where we've worked with a team of educators, researchers, and technologists to build an EdTech effectiveness platform and infrastructure for equipping modern learning environments with the capacity to build, share, and ultimately utilize evidence.
That's awesome. That's great. And I know that y'all been working since 2014 with you and the team there to try to tackle this incredibly important subject. And it's been fun for me to personally, in a couple different instantations of roles, to watch the evolution of the platform and see how it's been going. And as you try to balance that rigor, but also to keep the educator voice foremost and making sure that there's a role there on that side of things. Tarro, you and I have had a chance a few times to get to know each other and get to hear about your work. And one of the things that stuck out to me when we first spoke, I believe it may be back in January, we were here about the work done in Canton Public Schools, and your previous work with the Mississippi Department of Education was your focus on evidence and how you want to think about that in decision making. But tell the people a little bit about yourself and your role at the school district.
Hello, my name is Tarro Funches, and I am the English Learner Coordinator for Canton Public School District, which is a small, semi-rural district in Mississippi. I am, I'm a graduate of the Jackson State University. I have been in education well over 20 years. I will not say how long, but just know it's well over 20 years I've been in education. I started out as a teacher of pre-K students, then moved up to first grade. And then I became the English Learner Coordinator for the state of Mississippi by working with Mississippi Department of Education for 10 years. And that's when I fell in love with the English Learner program. And after working there for 10 years, I came to Canton Public School District as the EL coordinator in 2017. And from 2017 up until this very day, I still love what I do. I love educating students, and I love speaking for the community that feels like they do not have a voice, and the students and the families. So that's a little bit about me.
That's wonderful. And I know that one of the things that you had said that always stuck in my head was about being the advocate for those people that don't have that voice, they don't have a voice. And that it is so inspiring. And some of the work that we'll get to this in a little bit, but some of the work that you're underway, really gets to that. I want to take a step back though at first before we get into that, because part of the reason we're here is because there's just too much. There's too many EdTech tools. There's too many things, too many options that are available. And there was a piece of research that was done by the team over at Learn that found that school districts access around over 1,400 different tools each month. And when you break that down by the student, you break that down by the teacher, that's a lot of different touching points of things that can help, but could also slow things down and make it difficult for learning to happen. And the bigger question is that are all those things good? Are all those little touch points and EdTech solutions that are coming along actually useful, and are they actually helpful? So, Danny, from your perspective on kind of a national level, kind of what have y'all been seeing go over the last, since 2014, since Learn started? And then Tarro, I'll come to you in a second. I want to know what it's like, in your, we're not going to say how many years, but years of education and watching this underway. What's it like being sort of in this ocean of sort of people promising all these amazing things? So we'll start on the national level, but then I want to know what it's like really on the school level.
Cool. Yeah, well, I'll just kind of start by saying that evidence is more critical than ever in education. And one driver of this criticality is exactly what you're talking about, this proliferation of ed tech solutions that we've seen, and that increased digitization of the learning environment in general. Our product library at LearnPlatform, we have over 10,000 products, and that's growing every day. And as you just cited, districts are accessing north of 1,400 tools per month. And this obviously has implications for both education organizations and product providers. For our education agencies and from their perspective, they need consumable information to help inform decisions and support effective practice. Furthermore, the educators and administrators within those organizations need information to help them select from this wide array of tools, and then ultimately determine how to implement them effectively in their local contexts and with their students. And historically, this information has not been available. And when it is, it's not in a format that is readily consumable or actionable for practitioners. From the provider's perspective, so switching over to the provider's perspective, this proliferation and arguably an oversaturation of tools heightens the need for differentiation and creates a unique selling proposition through evidence of effectiveness. It's further accentuated by the fact that the demand side is getting more demanding. We're seeing LEAs and SEAs, the educators and administrators within them, asking for evidence during the purchasing process. We're seeing it show up on RFPs. It's also accentuated by an increase in regulation and compliance requirements for evidence and reporting. This has been driven by the Every Student Succeeds Act, which I know we'll talk more about, I'm sure, and the stimulus efforts of the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Funds, or ESSA. And I'll wrap it up, at least this portion, and kick it over to Tarro, but I'll sum up what I just said with this. There are a ton of tools, and teachers and administrators are extremely busy and have not traditionally had access to usable data and insights that can help them make informed decisions about the resources that we as a nation are using to educate our youth. That's a problem. The good news is that all sides of the market have definitely taken notice about the importance of evidence, and this is finally driving change. So with that, I will be quiet for a minute and kick it over to Tarro, because I would love to hear her perspective.
Thanks, Dan. Go, all you.
So from the perspective of a school district, evidence is what we need to make data-informed decisions. How effective is a product? As you said, we have a lot of products that school districts are bombarded with over the summer. In the beginning of the school year, we can provide this. We can provide this. However, with all of the products that's been presented to school districts, which one is effective? It's not as easy to say that because this product worked for ABC school district that it would actually work for Canton School District. So in that, you have to look at the qualitative and quantitative data and compare the demographics with your school district before you make a decision on which type of platform you're going to use for your students, because it may not work for your students. So as a school district, what we do, we sit down, we review data. After we review the data, we look at what we did last year. Where can we go? We got to grow up, So by looking at reviewing the data and saying that we have some areas that we need to grow in, then we have to get a product that shows us, that they can actually help us work on the certain area, the deficient areas that we may have, So that also helps narrow down for a school district, partnering with other school districts to see which product you use and comparing the demographics of the two districts.
Now, I'm really curious, Tarro, from your perspective, how did you sort of learn, like was this something that one of your early jobs that people said, you need to make sure that you have this filter, that you're thinking about this sort of focus on evidence, or was it something that you sort of developed yourself, or like kind of when did this lens start getting more crystallized and focused for you, where you would really have this sort of focus on thinking about evidence? Was there someone that you worked with that kind of helped encourage you thinking about that, or does that make sense?
So it was a combination. It was a combination working at the Department of Education, and I was monitoring federal Title III funding and providing professional development to school districts on how to educate EL students. And I also was sat on the board for WIDA and a couple national Title III boards. So working with these different boards and school districts, and they were like, we don't have enough resources. We don't have enough resources to educate our students. So what do we do? And then just because a group suggested that they would use a certain product, it didn't, like I previously stated, it did not work. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, we have to do what best fits us. Each school district has to do what's best fitting to their school district. So it was just a combination of seeing going to different school districts and seeing how things were being ran, and everybody's just running around like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, what do we do? Opposed to like taking a break, stepping back, speaking with your practitioners. Hey, what would you want to see? What do you want to see in your classroom? What do you want to see, or what do you want to use with your students? You know your students better than I do because I'm not in the classroom. So let's get the practitioners vote on what we use.
And Danny, that sort of makes me think about a little bit some of the conversations I had with your team over the years about some of what you were trying to do with Learn. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it was sort of aggregating that educator voice where sounds like what Tarro's doing. You're going around, you're talking to people, tell the people a little bit about. But I think for Learn, that was part of like, how do you help people share those experiences of how it's worked in the classroom? Am I right?
Yeah, definitely. We wanted to give voice to all stakeholders. We started with the focus on educators, and we started with an interest in understanding what works. We realized pretty quickly that in order to understand what works, we first had to understand what everyone was using. So we built the platform, our EdTech Effectiveness platform, as a system to kind of build out a systemic approach to understand all the different voices and collect the different sources of data in order to start to drive decisions. So we have a feedback mechanism that allows educators to provide input and evaluate the extent to which various tools are working for them and for their contexts. We also have a system of deeper engagement where we can collect data on usage and different outcomes, so we can start to link the extent to which an intervention is having an impact on important student outcomes. But in general, yes, we built that platform to really give folks a voice and to collect data on what's working and be a source of truth and help folks leverage that data to start to inform decisions.
That's great, and that's just one of the things that we're doing. We'll talk about that a little bit. We've at Off to Class with our own English language learning tools and services that we're really pleased and proud to be used by the Canton Public School District, and proud that we made it through the filter of this high bar that the team were looking for there. And we'll get to that in a second, but before we get to that point, you alluded to this a little bit. There's sort of the supply, there's the demand, and then there's it's the carrot and the stick, and there's some of the incentives that have been happening, but there's also a little bit of a stick in federal law of making sure that you satisfy certain requirements when you're spending federal money, stimulus money. Can you speak to that? Either one of you, because both of you are probably intimately aware of what it takes to make sure that you're on the right path.
Yeah, I can jump in quickly, and Tarro will have more on the ground insight in terms of what drives decisions and kind of the incentivization structure. But I'd say historically, too many decisions around selection and implementation have been made based on A, recommendation from peers, B, compelling marketing and sales efforts, or some sort of internet and app search that are supported by holistic ratings and reviews rather than sound systematic evidence that something actually works or is effective. And then, like Tarro has been talking about, linked to the specific context in which that they're working in. But fortunately, we're getting to a point where evidence is valued and sometimes required. We're also seeing educators and administrators, like I mentioned earlier, from schools and districts starting to ask for evidence when making these decisions. So if we as a system can kind of circumvent the classical impracticalities of traditional research, then we can get trustworthy evidence in the hands of decision makers in a way that's practical, actionable, and relevant. And I'll say quickly that school districts and states, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, but we've had education agencies from across the country have used LearnPlatform to conduct literally thousands of rapid cycle evaluations on a large swath of products to collect those insights on usage, cost, impact, in a way that informs those different types of decisions, whether they be instructional or operational or financial in nature. We definitely need more of this, and we need to continue building that infrastructure to support these types of efforts.
And Tarro, what does that practically look like for you and your team at the district and those areas? I hear about your approach to it and how thoughtful you are. Does the leadership team at your school district or the state, is there some sort of people making sure that the products that are being chosen match those standards, or how does it practically work? What's it like? I know you're in a bureaucracy as well. You're in a school system, so there's lots of different layers. You were in a budget meeting last week, and I'm sure that y'all got a million different things that are on your plate in terms of what you're thinking about. Where does evidence fit into that conversation when you're sitting around the table with your principal or whoever else?
So I'm gonna go back to when I was at Department of Education. When I was at Department of Education, when the law changed from No Child Left Behind to ESSEA to ESSA, and all the other acronyms, that it changed to, it went from research based to evidence based. So before, and it's in law that you have to make sure the product that you choose at one point was research based, and then at another point now is evidence based. So I always used to give the advice, research to research, because you can come and tell me that your product is going to help exit, just say 15% of my students at one school, whereas it's actually not, because, not, Danny, don't take offense to this, please. Okay. Not that is, so it may be a selling point for the particular vendor. However, I can go and listen to you and you present all these bells and whistles to me, but when I get in the classroom or in my school district and that evidence is not there, so then I have to justify why I've used federal funds in upwards of $6,000 on a product that my students didn't show growth. So it's always best to research and use evidence, as Danny was stating, partner with other districts and see what you have out there and what best fits you. So the gist of it is research.
Well, so I want to know, what does that practically look like? Y'all have a email chain? Do you have a Facebook group where you're sharing, hey, this is what works? You ask people, what does that practically mean? Do you just call people up that you work with and say, hey, I'm thinking about trying this product out. What have you seen? And I know you're using it. What does that practically look like?
So my shy self started a consortium last year of EO coordinators.
That is awesome.
You have a consortium for federal programs directors. So I felt like the EO coordinators, we needed a voice as well. So I started a consortium, and that gave us an opportunity to speak on a lot of things that we're working on, partner together on, okay, hey, this is working for us. I actually used a school district and called them because I always see, even when I was at Department of Ed, they always exited a great amount of students in the program. So I'm like, okay, well, their teachers receive the same training and education as our teachers here in Canton. So why can't my students in my district be another one of the quote unquote number one districts in the state? So what did I do? I reached out to the EO coordinators and asked them, hey, can we sit down and have a meeting and see what's working with you all, so we can really pretty much see what's the difference? What are we doing? What do we need to do? Because my goal is to make sure that my students exit and make Canton look much better than we already are looking. You know what I'm saying? So I will partner with other school districts, call them, hey, I'm using it so and so, and that didn't work quite well for me. So what are you doing? Because I see you exited a significant more amount of students than I did. So what are you using and how do you use it? So go and visit other districts and just sit and watch and see what's going on in the district and what you can bring back to your district, you know, to see what works best and how you can implement some of those things that they're doing in their district.
That's incredibly inspiring, Danny. I don't know how you feel, but like whenever I hear an educator, when you're focused on that, when you're doing that legwork and getting out there, and I'm curious, for your consortium, is this just coordinators in Mississippi, or is it in the southeastern region, or how big we talking, or your little shy self, what you've been doing?
Well, the consortium that I created is for here in Mississippi. It's just like in central Mississippi,
okay.
You know. But because of, and I hate to keep saying this, but because of the relationships that I made when I was at Department of Ed, I still have contacts, you know, with WIDA. I still have contacts with SST Sol, you know, and with Transact. And so I still have those partnerships and I still talk to those people, you know, like, hey, I'm going to use my resources in order to help my district be a better district. So that's what I do.
I love it. That's awesome. And it's incredibly inspiring. Danny, go ahead, Danny, go.
No, it is inspiring. You know, you mentioned the Every Student Succeeds Act, and Nathan, I think you kind of started this line question here with why does evidence matter? Maybe from a student outcome and impact level, but also from a funding level. And I didn't really touch on the funding piece, but in general with evidence, if you look across other fields and industries, you know, evidence-based practice has revolutionized the utility and effectiveness of the products and services rendered therein. Take healthcare, for example. It's always an easy analog or metaphor, but take healthcare, research and development, evidence building, scientific rigor. These things aren't optional. They are a requirement, often governed by laws and regulations. You wouldn't give your child, I mean, think of this as a thought experiment, but would you give your child medicine that has no basis in research or proof of its efficacy? I mean, I'd hope not. So why are we allowing or acquiescing to this practice in education? You may not develop a severe rash as a side effect of using a poor EdTech tool, but I think we'd all argue about the importance in the short-term and long-term gains and effects of a proper education. I don't think that's arguable. And on an outcome level, so specific to the outcomes and why is evidence important from an outcome level, obviously we need demonstrable data that shows our children are spending precious time using tools that will actually support their learning and growth as a student and as a member of society. Whether it's traditional academic outcomes, social emotional learning, 21st century skills, executive functioning, whatever it may be, there's many outcomes of importance, but we want to make sure we're using our time wisely and actually contributing to growth and learning. On a funding level, there are various funding mechanisms like ESSA, and we mentioned ESSA, and even state and federal RFPs and grants that are written as such that require solutions to be an evidence-based intervention in order to be eligible. So both philosophically and pragmatically speaking, that evidence really helps support the quality of our educational practice, helps support educators in their quest to implement effectively, and then also unlocks funding mechanisms for education agencies and product providers. And I know Tarro can speak at length about that. It's already mentioned the time with the department, so just wanted to mention that piece.
No, I think it's so important, and it's really interesting to hear you talk through it. And we got a great comment from Kelsey via LinkedIn. I'm actually going to see if I do. Oh, there we go. I've actually been able to magically put it up on the screen. I feel like feel very proud of myself right now. But from LinkedIn about this idea, that metaphor of a consortium and the honest space to observe and understand what actually moves the needle. I think that's so much whenever educators are able to honestly talk and share what works, that good things are going to happen because these people want to do what's right for students. They just need the space to be able to talk about this. And Daniel, some of the stuff that you were talking about took me back because some of the work that I've done previously were with large ed tech companies that were really trying to embed efficacy and that idea of taking some of the lessons from medicine and embedding those in education research. And something that you said also made me think that we wouldn't give our children food that's bad quality. We wouldn't give, you wouldn't want to give them medicine that you didn't know where it came from. And yet, we'll put kids in front of things for 8 hours a day, and we're not always sure what's the research basis. And particularly when you're dealing with learners like we do at Off to Class, or with Tarro, the ones that you're working with, the most vulnerable, it has a disproportionate impact if you give them something that's not research based. But I want to make one, you said something, the traditional and practicalities of research. And I think that's something, I think you're alluding to something that we wrestle with the efficacy research, is basically education's different than medicine, right? And, the answer is not just, I don't think, to have a bunch of RCTs or these randomized control trials. So what do you mean by the traditional and practicalities of research? And then I want to hear, Tarro, how you react to what Danny's going to say, and see if that actually jives with your experience.
Yeah, we all understand the iterative nature and the kind of the continuous development and continuous improvement process of developing technology and these innovative learning solutions. So you can't just sit back and wait 3 years before you actually try something. So I'm not suggesting that. We definitely need this rapid cycle of iteration and rapid cycle evaluation approach to testing and examining and experimenting and determining what works for whom and which conditions, and then amplifying that and disseminating what we learn from that. Related to RCTs, should we be doing RCTs? Yes and no. Randomized control trial, which is traditionally the gold standard. Historically, we've considered RCTs as the gold standard. The reason being that randomization removes the likelihood that systematic errors affect the results. In other words, it allows you to make inferences about the effect being an outcome of the actual intervention, rather than differences in the groups being studied or the host of other variables that we know exist in the education setting. However, as we kind of alluded to here, that gold standard was somewhat adopted by, or maybe even forced onto us, onto the education system from other fields where scientific inquiries are a bit clearer. In education, there are obviously ethical and practical concerns with just randomly assigning a tool to a subset of students. First, you don't want to deprive the control group of students from this potential source of growth and learning and advancement. Second, it's not always practical to say, give half of the students in your classroom the tool and then withhold it from the other half. Like, we can understand the difficulties there. On top of that, there are various just methodological concerns in general from a scientific and research standpoint that limit their utility. I won't go in there. That could be a whole separate webinar. But although RCTs have their benefits and RCTs are great at doing what they do well, rather than ask for more RCTs, I would revise that and implore the following instead. Let's set up the infrastructure for education organizations and solution providers and everyone in this field to iteratively conduct those rapid cycle evaluations that I was referring to, and other types of studies of varying rigor in a way that is appropriate for the decisions being made by the stakeholders who are making them and for the environments in which these decisions are being made.
And that sounds exactly a little bit, Tarro, what would you and your consortium and some of the people are already kind of doing. I'd just be curious, and what evidence you're looking for, what you want to see more of, or just reacting to some of what Danny just talked about.
I want to go back a little ways with what Danny was saying as far as funding and like researching, so when as far as federal funding, whenever a district purchases anything with federal funds, we have to get competitive quotes, right? So that gives you an opportunity to research two or more companies, to see which one you think will fit best for your school district. And I will say, don't always repeat what you did last year, because another product may come in and offer a little bit more rigor, as Danny was saying, and by having, we hate to do it, but we have to do it, by getting the competitive quotes, that also forces you to do research on different companies to see how it fits your school district. I always use the term or the phrase that it's not one size fit all with learning, right? So when you are trying to find a product, or when a product, as Danny said, we don't want to give our kids something that has not been FDA tested or approved. I feel the same way when it comes to educating our children. There's no need of getting a product that's only going to work for one subgroup of students, right? Or one demographic of students. Because in a lot of instances, I've seen that a school district or a state will use use certain school districts as guinea pigs. You know what I mean? So they'll go in and they'll provide this product to this school district and then say, oh, this product works very well for ABC school district, and their students did this, they did that, they did this, and they have all these beautiful data points with all these plus signs, no negatives or anything like that. But when you go to a different part of the state where students are not exposed to certain learning and students are not exposed to certain things, you can't say that ABC product is going to work for XYZ district. So it is always good, hey, do your research, sit down and have your sample districts that we're going to use and say, we're going to see what this product does in this district, but make sure that it's equal. That when you go and do those things, make sure it's equal, that you have this community represented and that community represented at the same time, so we can see how both products work.
That's so wise, and it's something my own thinking sort of evolved on the subject of the years. And I'm kind of at the point where I think research matters a lot and it's very important, but you're almost there's a point in my head where build products based on what is proven about how people learn. There's learning science that goes into how that's proven by how we learn reading, math, whatever it might be, and then implement that product really well and try. And if you do those two things right, that there's a lot of positive things that can happen. And so I think learning what works in different populations and different parts of the state, that sometimes gets skipped over, at least in my perspective. And watching ed tech, we want to just find a tool that you plug and play, that you put it in the wall, and it delivers these outcomes. But it's so much of it's about implementation, and it's about how you roll it out. And I'm sure, Tarro, you've seen some great implementations, and I'm sure you've seen some less than great ones as well.
Yes, I have. And how you can tell if a product is working well, you just wait to the end. That spring semester comes when you have to test the students, right? And when you test the students and the teacher say, well, I've been doing this, and you go and you do your observations and making sure that everybody you got your checklist, you got your observation checklist. I see this and I see that, I see that, right? But the outcome of sitting and looking at that checklist while I'm sitting in your presence. What do you do when I'm outside of your presence? That's the outcome. When it's time for the test taking and your students is sitting there, you've hyped them up the whole school year long. Well, we're going to do this and we're going to do that, and this is our goal. You have parties and saying that this is the goal, and you're thinking the whole time. My teachers they implemented it. I have had my staff meetings and told my students, during the staff meeting that they're implementing everything and everything is going good. But no, when we get the test data back, it does not reflect that. So how do you monitor the full implementation? Trust,
exactly. Right? Exactly. It's important. And Mississippi, at least right now, has had some great results on the state. Some of the reading scores have done really well. So we're very proud to see that. Something that should be celebrated. It's my home state. So I'm very happy. The outgoing superintendent of education seems to have done some great work, Dr. Carrie Wright. But Dan, I wanted to get to a point that we should have covered a little bit earlier, but there's this idea of this different tiers of evidence, right? And we talk, that's something that's brought up in law, and I think it could be a little bit confusing, or as people are trying to understand what do these different things mean, what's the distinction. I'm just curious, can you talk us through just really quickly those different tiers? And with Off to Class, we've just done a logic model with LearnPlatform, which means that we sort of explain the justification for the problem that we're looking to solve. Here's the outcome of what were interventions. Here's why we think it should work. So it's at one tier, but how does that fit in? What are the tiers? How does that fit in that progression?
Yeah, we mentioned RCTs and kind of the gold standard, and then I went on to say let's rather ask about doing more RCEs, rapid cycle evaluations that may be an RCT or may be quasi-experimental in nature, correlational, but different levels of rigor. Well, ESSA kind of provides a nice on-ramp and provides a framework to help decision makers in education agencies select, implement, and then ultimately evaluate educational interventions, whether it's EdTech or otherwise. And certain funding and compliance requirements, as we've mentioned, can be met by demonstrating certain levels of evidence based on this framework. So essentially, ESSA delineates 4 levels of evidence and provides a little bit of clarity, or more so definition, to an otherwise somewhat amorphous term of research. The first level, which every student succeeds after ESSA designates as Tier 4, is demonstrates a rationale. This requires the solution to have a logic model or theory of change, and then plans to conduct an actual study. Essentially, this step lays the research foundation and builds out that theoretical rationale through what Nathan mentioned earlier as learning sciences and other types of rationale, and then helps the solution show that it delivers impact through these various mechanisms that are supported by extant research or existing research. ESSA's Tier 3 through Tier 1 then get progressively more rigorous, starting with the correlational study that shows promising evidence at Tier 3, where you can demonstrate an association between using your product and various student outcomes of import. Tier 2 is a quasi-experimental design that shows moderate evidence, where you have an actual treatment and comparison group. And then Tier 1 is that randomized control trial or true experimental design, and that, according to ESSA, shows strong evidence. The framework ultimately offers a nice progression that any solution provider or education agency can leverage, really at any stage in the product's development process, even at ideation, to start building the foundation and then proceed to conduct studies at various levels of rigor based on what's appropriate for your stage in development and what's appropriate for the environment in which you're implementing.
That's awesome. Thanks for doing that. We had another great comment from LinkedIn that I think both of you might resonate with. John Weathers, I think the real issue isn't student differences across communities. Rather, we don't even track and include analysis, fidelity of implementation and use, that we're not actually tracking how well things are implemented. I don't know if completely, but I'd be curious, does that resonate with the two of you, that that's one of the things we need to do better of tracking how well products are being implemented in different school districts? Or what do you think? You can also disagree. That's completely fine.
I'll say I fully agree with the need to track implementation fidelity, usage across different student subgroups, subpopulations. But I would disagree that we don't do that, because at LearnPlatform, that's something that's integral to what we study. We include, and I mentioned, districts running thousands of RCEs. In all of those, there's a fidelity of implementation based on recommended dosage or target goals. There's also a linkage of how much usage is being done. So there's some dosage type studies, but we definitely include that. But I absolutely agree that it's critical to include that, because if you see a 0, so you run a rapid cycle evaluation and the report comes out and you see a 0 on the effect size, is that because the product didn't work, or is it because it wasn't implemented correctly and no one used it? What's the reason for that? That helps you dig deeper into that. So that, in addition to a host of other variables that we, in the research world or vernacular call covariates, we include all these covariates so that we can account for these differences.
What do you think, Tarro? Do you think that we need that in Mississippi or in the places you're working with, that they do a good job of tracking implementation, or that's something needs to be have a better job done with or done on that side of things?
So I'm with Danny on this. I agree and disagree. I'm going to speak from just the standpoint of my school district. When I met with my EO interventionists at the beginning of last year, and I told them, introduce 2 new products that we will be using. And I also told them a product is only as good as you use it. You cannot say that it's effective if you don't use it. So the implementation part of it has to be done. So I track the usage. That's one of the things I love about Off to Class. I get to see the usage either from standpoints of my students, how often they logging in, if they're actually completing their assignments, and if the teacher is actually assigning the assignments, how many minutes they're doing it, so if I expect Tara to exit the EO program, but I have not assigned Tara any lessons within the platform, or I have not fully implemented anything that has been brought forth through PD or professional development, or through just the research-based program that evidence-based program that we're using at the time, I can't expect the students to show growth because it's not being fully implemented in the classroom. If that makes sense.
No, that makes 100% sense. And it's, I have to say, Dan, I didn't know she was going to give us this nice shout out. So that was not an advert for Off to Class, but we're very grateful to hear it. And it is from our team of product developers and the researchers behind it. That's one of the things that they do want to make sure that we can do, or kind of constantly think about that, about how we save teacher time. But you only know if you're saving teachers time if it's being rolled out correctly and it's used correctly. Like that's really, really important. I am curious, this came up a couple times with outcomes, and Tarro, like, you made this point about, we look at the student outcomes at the end of things, and I think we'd be remiss. And if there are questions, please put those in the chat. We'll try to bring those in. We got two great perspectives, but we'd be really remiss if we didn't get back to some of the outcomes that you're seeing, and I would love to just to hear a little bit about some of the things that you've been able to see in your time in Canton School District, some of the improvements in student lives, because at the end of the day, that is what is important. That's what Dan's working for and Learn's working for, and that's what we're working for. So, I just want to give you a chance to share some of what's going on, some of the good things that are going at Canton.
So I started in Canton, like I said, in 2017. And when I got here, it was that districts, not just Canton, but districts as a whole, are confused about how to educate English learners, right? And I always tell teachers and admins, do not allow language to be the barrier when educating a student. Okay, we're not going to do that. So we're going to focus on language acquisition. And I think from what I know, from 2017 up until now, present day, that with us focusing more on language acquisition and giving the students exactly what they need. I had when we first got here, we were using one tool district-wide, but using that one tool district-wide was not giving what it was supposed to give as far as language acquisition and the students going from being a newcomer English learner to a long-term EL student. It was not, because it didn't fit every student, so it's about finding that perfect fit for the subgroup of kids that you're working with. So I did not see the need or the purpose to have K-12 using the same product when you get at the high school level and the students is like, this is a game. Ms. Funches, this is a game. I mean, I could sit at home and play. And this is actually what was said, Ms. Funches, I could sit at home and play a game. This is a game. It's too baby-fied, So, and then you have the elementary students who sitting in the lab and they're just clicking away because guess what? What they felt like it was? A game. They felt as if it was a game, right? So I dug a little deeper and I was like, okay, I have to find some products that's going to work for elementary level students and my secondary level students. So my secondary level students will not feel as if they are being, baby-fied, right? So what we did was we went from exiting possibly maybe 10 students out of a school year, out of 400 and some odd students, to we are now back to our pre-COVID numbers and exiting. We exited maybe, I think we exited like 80 students out of 300 and some odd students this school year. So we're back at our pre-COVID, not back right there on the cusp of meeting our pre-COVID numbers, all because we researched. I met with my EO interventionist once a month. One Friday out of a month, I gave them one Friday out of the month, and I met with them. I gave them the opportunity to speak on just an open, honest conversation. What's working? Is the product giving you what it needs to give you? Are you satisfied with what you're doing? If not, what can I do? I had those monthly check-ins with my team every month. And I told them I have an open door policy. Email me, call my cell phone. Just don't call me too late after hours. But call me, and I'm just one phone call away. And I always feel like that there's a a disconnect between admins and practitioners.
Mm.
So with that disconnect, because I know what it felt like being in the classroom and felt like this is what you're going to use. You know, you have no choice in it because this is what the school district paid for. This is what you're going to use. And I don't think that's the best approach to take when I'm not the one in the classroom implementing. We talked about implementation. So I'm not the one in the classroom implementing these things. So I felt the need whenever I brought in a new product, hey, I want you to sit in through this demo with me. I want you to help me research this because you're going to be using this product, not me. So we sat and I created a team within my district that I called the EL Roundtable. So we would come together and sit at the round table and we would discuss what's working, what's not working. And we didn't do it once at the beginning of the year and we don't do it once at the end of the year. We do it every month and then we meet collectively face to face to review data every quarter.
That's tremendous. That is tremendous. And I know from talking to you, and we'll share some of this later again, that type of work makes an impact on individual students in classroom after classroom. We're getting towards the end of time, and I'm gonna throw a little bit of a curveball, see if y'all can handle this. We got two people on either side of the equation. We've got the educator with Tarro, and you're down and you're in the trenches, and you're doing the work. And then you got the researcher, and you got a team of Learn that have been received a lot of attention, a lot of funding, a lot of great national attention for what they're doing to try to drive efficacy research or research in the conversation. What I'm curious about is from either of you, what do you want to see more of from the other in the future? So for Dan, your side, what would you love to see educators do more of? People that like Tarro. And for Tarro, what do you want to see groups like Dan's and researchers? What do you want to see more of? What's the type of stuff that would be helpful for you? Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I'll kick it off and save the best for last, which is Tarro. So I'll get us started here. I guess just speaking philosophically, I told you I have a tendency to do this. The onus, is on all of us to provide the best possible educational system and learning environment at large for our students. Solutions that are rooted in evidence may not work every single time for every single student, which Tarro has alluded to on multiple occasions today alone. But they have a legitimate track record, or at least have documented rationale of, successfully impacting important educational outcomes that I would say are consequential and have momentous impact on our children and our future. And that commitment to evidence is an indication that they will continuously improve based on learnings and feedback, and will continue to push and be committed to evidence. So in my opinion, we need more efforts like this to build and share evidence, and we need more demand from folks like Tarro. Not that she doesn't have enough already, but we need more folks like Tarro who demand evidence and then who utilize evidence to inform decisions, and not only just use what is out there, but then think about it in a discerning way, with different contexts, with different students, with different situations. Ultimately, each and every educational tool or resource should start by building, at least having that research foundation or some sort of root in evidence, and then aspire to conduct studies in every context. Because our efforts to achieve the same, we will learn immensely about what works for whom and under which conditions, because not every tool, like I said, is going to work every time in every environment with every student. So ultimately, I would just say we need more stakeholders who are committed to building and using evidence to inform decisions. Because really there's no room, in my opinion, and I would argue that there's no room for intuition or superstition or tradition when it comes to making decisions that have that momentous impact and consequential, non-trivial impact on our children's futures.
I have to say I grew up in a church context in the South, and you probably hear someone say "Amen" if you heard someone say that. I don't know, Tarro, how you feel about that, but the idea of aggregating demand louder, that I think I said to you the first time we met, if I could give you a platform at the state house, what would you say to the governor? What would you say to the federal government? I don't know. You don't have to get into all that now, but right now, what would you say? What would you say to the researchers? What do you want? What do you want more of? What would help you? Advocate more for this? What would be helpful?
As Danny said, more collaboration across the board, more collaboration between the researching team for the companies and school districts. We have to have it. We have to have it. We have to have a product to work with our kids. And thank God we have people like Danny that's going to make sure that we have those products. So we need more collaborations with the district. Let's do more of on-site research, if that's a thing. You know what I'm saying? So you go out to the district that has your product. Okay, let's see how you're working, how it's working for you, and do maybe some comparison with the district that's not using, a district that's willing to provide data and say that, well, this is the product I'm using, and this is my data, and I'm using LearnPlatform, and this is my data, and my data is here, and your data is here. So what can we do? So then that's when Danny would come in and sell himself in the company, and just collaboration all the way around. And I agree with everything that Danny said. So
look, we're all singing from the same hymn book, and it's good on that regard. I do think that there's something so important about also amplifying and elevating the work that's going on, whether Tarro, it's with your district, with Learn, with other areas, making sure more people know about it. It's something I've been trying to do for a while in different roles, and I'm pleased that we get a chance to highlight it here, because I think when you have these big national ed tech conferences, sometimes you have people that show up on the stages, and that's great. But there's really good work that's sometimes happening on a local level that we got to connect those dots up and help people see how it's all part of this same movement towards making sure that we're focused on the right things in ed tech and education. I want to thank the two of you again for being here. I want to encourage everyone to go check out Canton Public School District, the great work that they're doing. Also, Danny and the team over at LearnPlatform. They're always happy to help you in that move towards education and education research. It's something we care about at Off to Class, and we're interested in making a difference in the life of English language learners. And we're pleased to get to work with these two amazing partners. So thank y'all for taking some time today, and I hope for the people that watched enjoyed, and for the ones that will watch in the future that you'll get some benefit out of it. So with that, I'm going to end it. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks all. My door is open. Email me.
Remember,